Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. Having a relationship is one of those wonderful things that happen to people, and it happens well. Just think about it. You meet someone and you feel very much in love over time, and you know that you love the way they make you feel about yourself. But what happens after a month goes by, maybe 6 months or perhaps a year, and all of a sudden things go astray and you realize you really can't stand all the things that you used to love about the person when you first got together? Yes, the honeymoon phase is over, and now it feels like work is about to be. So join us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today as we talk with our guest, who is a clinical psychologist from the University of Massachusetts, where she became a member of that school's prestigious graduate faculty. She's written a book, 5-Minute Relationship Repair. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Susan Campbell. Susan, thank you for joining us here on the program today.
Thank you, Daniel. Great to be with you.
Now, this is, there are a lot of relationship books out there, but this is pretty unique. Tell us how you came to create the 5-Minute Relationship Repair.
Well, my co-author John Gray and I have seen that most couples, when they get into a little misunderstanding or a bigger one, try to explain themselves, justify themselves. They get into long arguments, and that is not helping. What couples need is a clear, vulnerable language to repair the damages or prevent further misunderstandings. They don't need more words. They need more skillful communication. So that's what this is about. It's about getting quickly to the heart of the matter of what needs to be communicated and doing it in a way that really touches your partner's heart and actually heals the wounds that gave rise to those misunderstandings. Because, most of our understandings are projections of our own fears onto the other person. Like, if I'm afraid I'm not worthy in some way, I will project onto my partner, he's not that into me. He doesn't want to hear this. That's what I mean by project. I will imagine my partner feels toward me the way that I kind of unconsciously fear about myself. Mm-hmm. And most of these projections are all unconscious, but in this book we help you make all this stuff more conscious so you can really talk about it and identify it very quickly before it takes you down the wrong road.
Now, you talk about the difference between core feelings, it sounds like you kind of talked about that a little bit, and reactive feelings. Describe that in a little more detail, because I think when people come to understand that in and of itself, they realize the problems they have in their partner were problems they already probably had before the relationship even started.
That's right. Your core feelings are the needs that people actually have that are like very real. The need for connection, the need for being paid attention to. And so when we have a fear that need isn't being met, like that kind of a fear is a core feeling, like a fear that I'm not good enough, or fear that I'm being rejected, or fear that I'm being criticized or judged. They're just fears. That doesn't mean they're real, but they're core because they're related to actual human needs and relational needs. Our reactive feelings come usually from that nervous system automatic reaction that happens when we get our buttons pushed, which the automatic nervous system reactions are things like fight, which then that emotion would be like anger. So that's more of like an immediate reaction. You don't pass through your real true feeling nature. It's just a quick, push away. Or flight, which is like running, the need to just run and get out of here, and feelings like that, like, got to get out of here. Or shut down, fight, flight, or freeze. So freeze is kind of shut down. So that's another kind of reactive feeling. So we get into these automatic reactions based on how our nervous system is wired. Mm-hmm. And it has really nothing to do with the deeper human nature of me as an individual. Those fight, flight, freeze reactions even happen in animals, primates and so forth.
It's really fascinating when you think about, you always hear the same message out there about repairing relationships. It's about communication. But I think a lot of times people think, okay, we're communicating, but what they're really doing is they're saying what they feel and what they think, and they're not really hearing the other person. Communication is really important. Describe how the approach is that it can become effective, especially when it comes to repairing a relationship in 5 minutes.
Well, most people's communication actually has so much unconsciousness in it.
Right.
And I mean unconsciousness about our own feelings and needs. Yes, hearing the other person at a deeper level is important, but you really aren't very well equipped to hear another person if you haven't looked more deeply and consciously into what makes you yourself tick. Because, in some ways, Daniel, we're all kind of similar. We all have very similar emotional needs. And so if I can look in and realize that, my childhood conditioning led me to feel like I have to fight to get attention. Maybe I was inconsistent. This is one of the things that happens with some people, being very inconsistently parented at a very early age, where one minute you're loved and the next minute you're completely ignored, like you didn't exist or aren't worth much to your caregivers. And so that kind of inconsistent parenting will lead a lot of people in their adult relationships to think that they have to overstate their needs. And so that's one of those unconscious patterns. I have to overstate. I have to up the ante, dramatize in order to get through to this man, Other people learned that talking about myself or my feelings or even expressing myself doesn't even do any good anyway. I was one of 8 children. I was lost in the shuffle. I was born somewhere in the middle there of 8 children. I'm making this up. That's not true of me particularly. And it didn't do any good to express. So that person will grow up with the pattern of kind of under-expressing. And if you're with a partner like that, and you're one of these people that needs quite a bit of reassurance, and a lot of us are like that. Most of us need more reassurance than we think we should. But if you're a person who needs a lot of communication and you're with this more silent person, you might misinterpret their signals because that's just their personality style. But in this book, we help you look at your early conditioning, look at some of the, we call it the flat sides, or the places where you weren't as well developed because you weren't given a certain gift. So you have to give that to each other now in your adult relationships. So you really can learn more about yourself and your partner very, very quickly using these tools in the 5-minute relationship repair book.
It's just so interesting how relationships really dig up things that probably we didn't really know were there. Especially as you were talking about as we were raised. And, I remember there was a time that I was talking with my wife, and she began to laugh, and I had this feeling like I was being made fun of, and it kind of irritated me. But the funny thing was catching that moment that I was feeling that way and realizing, I'm seeing something different than actually exists. Snapping back into the moment, I asked, what are you laughing for? And she described, what it was all about, and I thought, okay. But I felt this need to react and get angry about that, and it had nothing to do with what she was doing. And we find ourselves in a lot of those kinds of situations, don't we?
Yeah, I love your example, Daniel, and it's unusual for many people to be as present as you and just pause and say, "What are you laughing about, honey?"
Right.
And I'm going to say, "Good for you." And we can all learn to be as aware as Daniel Davis is what I want to say to the audience here. That was a pretty cool way that you responded. And a lot of us just start with that automatic reaction, and then we take off from there. We don't step back and get present. But this communication practice that's called 5-minute relationship repair does advise as soon as you see any of those early warning signals, like that reaction, like it's like your heart skips a beat, or you start to feel tension or heat rising in your body, any of those automatic signals that you're triggered, we ask you, and we ask couples to agree to pause, to stop talking, to pause and notice that inner reaction and get present, just like Daniel does. Really, I mean, it's possible for all of us to do that, to get present, to do some self-calming. We have a 3-step formula for what to do when your buttons get pushed. Pause and do some of that inner self-calming. So that's the second step, calm, and then repair, which is when you actually do a new type of communication that we teach you how to do in the book.
Now, it's really fascinating when you think about relationships and you realize, that this is a real opportunity for you to actually improve yourself. It isn't about the other person a lot of times, all these troubles or these buttons, as you were saying earlier, that are pushed. And, you talk about the 6 steps to heal the fears that block intimacy. Let's talk about those for a little bit, because I think those are really important, that if our listeners at least, reflect on these for a while, in relationship to their relationship, so to speak, they might realize, that relationships, although they may be a little bit of work or maybe in some cases a lot of work, the question comes, is it worth doing the work? And I say absolutely. But let's talk about those 6 steps.
Yeah, and these are really 6 steps to take with yourself when you do feel like your button's gotten pushed. So the very first step, Daniel, is to accept that you, like everybody else, have these unconscious automatic reactions that we call triggers or buttons. We all have this stuff buried in our subconscious, unless we got absolutely perfect parenting, which I think is impossible, really. Because parents are busy, and it's just they weren't that educated about all this deep stuff that we're all learning now. So first, accept. The next is learn the early warning signals of when you and your partner are triggered, like hot face, tight jaw. We talked about some of those already, early warning signals from the body, but there are also early warning signals in the mind. When you start judging your partner or thinking about how they ought to be different, or even as harmless seeming a thing as, I'd like to improve this person and give them some advice, that's another signal that your button's gotten pushed. So we help people through this process learn what are the various early warning signals that you could possibly be on the lookout for. So accept and then learn the early warning signals, and then learn how to stay with a feeling. Once you feel that triggered feeling, we have a process in the book called compassionate self-inquiry, which is good for singles, couples, parents, even teenagers can learn this kind of thing. It means stopping a reaction and feeling more deeply into where that reaction is really residing. So you feel it in your body, you feel the mind chat. I mean, you notice the mind chatter. You don't feel mind, but you're aware of that, and you sit for a few minutes or as long as it takes. It could be just 30 seconds. Once you get good at this process, you can do it very quickly. I personally can do it in an instant now. I mean, I can do all these 6 steps in a complete instant once I get triggered. It's because it's become kind of so automatic from practice. So you stay with the feeling that you've got, and you see what it reminds you of. And sometimes it's like a metaphor, like it reminds me of being smothered, like somebody's putting a pillow over my head. Or it reminds me of starving. I mean, if you have these little metaphors, that can help you tune into, well, what is that deeper need then that might be there? If you're smothered or you're starving, you can kind of start intuiting, well, I need space if I'm smothering, or I need food if I'm starving, and food could mean love or touch or some generous, reassuring compliment. And then as you stay with that longer, you begin to feel like there is this part of yourself, and sometimes you have a childhood memory that can help you identify this part of yourself, like the starving part or the smothered part, let's call it that for now, that really has always been there inside of you. It's like that's in your subconscious. That would be called like a core fear of yours that you kind of carry around and that motivates you, like a core fear that nobody wants to give to me, that I'm always going to be a little hungry, a little frustrated. See if any of our listeners identify with this kind of thing. It takes a lot of self-awareness to instantly identify with my examples, but once you read the book, there's so many ways that we guide people to look into this stuff that there'll be one way that you'll find that'll connect with you. Mm-hmm. But this is basically inner child work, Daniel, where you tune in, and even if you don't have a childhood memory, you kind of tune into that starving part with loving compassion, with tenderness. In the book we say, imagine this part of you is like a much-loved child who has come to you hurting. You wouldn't tell that child to, bug off. Mm-hmm. You would embrace that child. And so a lot of us don't treat ourselves very kindly at times, especially when we're hurting. We think, well, that part of myself is a nuisance. No, it's an immature part, and it gets me into trouble in my relationship, so I don't want it here. But that's not going to heal you. The only way to fully heal anything is to include it with love and with compassion and awareness. So that's the hugest piece. And then after you be with that, you can come back out and talk to your partner about what you discovered and what the needs really are, instead of saying, you never listen to me or you're always bugging me, those two polar opposite reactions. You say, I need some reassurance that I'm loved, or I need reassurance that I'm accepted. I took that as a criticism, what you said, and what I really need is to hear that I'm good enough for you, that I'm acceptable as I am. Mm-hmm. And so those are the basic steps, and then there's your partner giving you the loving reassurance because they want to. This is now we're at the repair process. You go inside, you learn what's really going on. We give you a fill-in-the-blank script in the book where you are able to identify the behavior that you wish you hadn't done and say, here's the thing I wish I hadn't done, but what was really going on inside of me when I did that was this fear, and what I need is some reassurance that this fear is not accurate, that the fear that I'm not lovable or not acceptable. And then your partner wants to give you that reassurance because they're not feeling blamed anymore. They're feeling connected to you because you're connected to yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so fascinating when you think about relationships and, as you talk about communication, how we tend to want to take the position of being right. How do we kind of navigate around something like that?
It's so sad, isn't it?
It is.
When we see
it's
ourselves
like, no, I'm right, and I'm going to stick to my guns even if it isn't real.
Yeah. Well, in our book, we talk about how the nervous system is actually wired, the primitive nervous system. I mentioned animals before, that animals do the fight, flight, freeze thing, and we evolved from animals, and we still have that same part of our brain. And that brain, the reptilian brain, there's an amygdala section, which is called by a brain scientist the survival alarm system. So we all have this survival alarm system that's always scanning for danger. Yes, we have a higher cortex that can think and say, no, your partner's showing their teeth now, but they're not a tiger. Your higher brain can say that. But sometimes that higher brain just goes out the window because our brains are actually wired so that survival alarm system takes precedence whenever we experience a threat. And in humans now, it's not the threat of a tiger jumping out at you and grabbing you. It's the threat of losing connection to the, I put it in quotes here, to the one you depend on, the one you have come to depend on, like your intimate partner. So the more like that kind of interdependence occurs in a relationship, the more vulnerable you're going to be to getting triggered. You know, people go, well, geez, I never got triggered when I was single. No, because you didn't have that kind of emotional dependency going on. So that's, we can, if we understand that survival alarm system, that just automatically takes over in all of us, that somehow takes the blame out of your partner being triggered and the need to be right and the need to make somebody wrong about the fact that you got triggered, how silly you were or how silly I was. We really develop more compassion for us humans when we realize that to some degree we're all at the mercy of these overreactive, because they're wired that way, overreactive survival alarm systems. And we can, of course, learn to bring our higher brain back online really quickly and reassure ourselves that we're safe and ask for reassurance. But there just is this basic brain wiring that is in us, and we need to come to terms with that. Mm-hmm. And this is how. This little formula, pause, calm, repair, this is how to do that.
You know, for our listeners out there, when it comes to relationships, especially if you can get to a point where it becomes a long-term relationship, what are the rewards of having a relationship like that?
Well, one of the rewards is that you actually can rewire your nervous systems and rewire each other's nervous systems toward becoming a more secure functioning individual, which means you don't get triggered so quickly because you've learned like this compassionate self-inquiry, you've learned to pause quickly and get back connected, get your connection back really quickly. So you are actually strengthening the wiring between your primitive brain and your higher brain as an adult. And that would have been really, really strong as a child during the ages, infancy to about 2 years old. That's when that stuff is really developing, that brain wiring. And if you had had perfect parenting, that would have been very strong wiring, and you wouldn't be so reactive. But to the degree to which there was either inconsistency or neglect or abuse or any, some very harmless types of neglect, it's seemingly harmless, to the extent that you experience some of that as children, as an adult, you now need a partner. Those of us who are trigger happy, we're the ones that most need a partner to help us rewire that. And that's one of the true advantages of being with a partner is you can give each other, there's 3 things that a loving parent gives an infant to create that kind of secure bond so that the child grows up trusting the world and being kind of at home in the world. And those 3 things are loving touch, no surprise there, soothing voice tones, and gentle, loving eye contact, like really paying attention to your child. Okay, to the extent that we didn't get that stuff, even if we did get it, we still need it in our adult relationships. So your adult partner can give you those same things, touch, eye contact, soothing voice. And to the extent that you give each other that kind of thing and frequent reassurances, you will heal those insecure wiring circuits that have been with you all your life. So that's one of the hidden benefits of an adult love relationship. Of course, growing together. It's all about growth and learning together. Because if you're not growing and learning together, like learning from your differences, you're gonna have frequent upsets. And I think it's pretty obvious probably to most of your listeners that we can learn from somebody who's different from us. Mm-hmm. Even though it's a little button pushing, it's a little threatening, there's so much to learn from somebody who's different, and just expand your world. But beyond that learning, there's the healing of your brain wiring.
You know, Susan, that's a really interesting point. And when a lot of people think about relationships, they think about how much they have in common. But it's actually a lot of times good to have a lot of things that you're not in common with, so that you can learn different perspectives, isn't it?
It sure is. And I know you mentioned in your intro, there's like the romance stage where we emphasize our similarities, we're just destined for each other and this is so harmonious, and then later things kind of break down. I think that's nature's way of actually getting us together in the first place.
Right.
And then showing us that, well, there's more to learn, though. There's more than just the tip of the iceberg to this relationship. And I think there is a big evolutionary plan here that we're all supposed to grow and learn. So let's get with it. That's what I say.
I agree. Now, Susan, is there a website people can find out more about the book and some other tips and perhaps things they can find out more about how to repair a 5-minute relationship repair?
Yes. Our website is 5minuterelationshiprepair.com. We also have a Facebook page where we post a lot of our radio interviews, like this one between you and me, and it's the facebook.com/5-minute relationship repair. And you can just Google 5-minute relationship repair, and you'll find all kinds of articles. There's already many articles and interviews, even though the book's only been out since mid-February. It's selling like hotcakes, and there's lots of media interviews and YouTube videos that you can find just by Googling either me or the book title.
So there's really no excuse for anyone not to move forward, isn't there?
That's right. A lot of this stuff is free. You don't even have to buy the book. But if you really want to go to the depths that I'm talking about here, you do need to buy the book and work it. It's not just a book you read. It is a workbook. It is a self-guided workbook for both personal healing and couple healing.
Very good. The book is The 5-Minute Relationship Repair. Our guest today is Susan Campbell. Susan, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Thank you, Daniel. It was a great pleasure.
We want to thank you, the listeners out there. As you can see, it is possible to repair that relationship. The question is, do you desire to do so and find those hidden gems within you that cause those triggers that may move you forward to the kind of dream relationship you would like to have with your partner? You can also find out more by visiting us at Beyond50Radio.com. That is the number 50. And also follow us on Twitter at Beyond50Radio as well. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for joining us. And remember, live your day past halfway.